Hey, boys and girls, weather report for June 17th, 2021. I don't know why we're doing this, but we will. What's happening? So, last night there was a debate on Modern Day Debate. And did anybody watch the debate?
We did.
Oh, yeah.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yep. Dr. Dan, I mean, I thought he destroyed him. Of course, all the Christians think he did. He didn't. All the Christians think Kent, Kent won, of course. That's typical, but yeah. Dr.
How
Dan.
did they think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I watched it too. I think Dr. Dan destroyed him just with some of the expressions on his face when Kent was floundering and saying, it was 72 degrees everywhere. And then, 73 or maybe 74. Or, it's like, oh my.
That was annoying.
Yeah, and then his bullshit that. Okay, so what they believe is that I think it was 4 times as much water as in the ocean today cracked up out of the deep and blew out and also rained down. Actually, if all the atmosphere, all the water out of the atmosphere rained down, we'd only have 1 inch of rain across the entire world. So that accounts for 1 inch of it, right? The rest of it, the other 3 times the ocean volume today, or 4 times, because they don't believe that the oceans were as full, came out of the earth, blowing out of the earth. So he says that, it was blowing out of the Pacific plate, the fracture in the Pacific and the Atlantic, which blew the continents apart. And the continents were flying apart at, as SFT says, like 45 miles an hour or something like that. And all of this was going on. And he says that the Ark was sitting over there in wherever, Alabama or whatever, Israel, right? And it wasn't moving at all. It was just bobbing up and down gently, and there were no cracks in the wood. And we're supposed to believe that shit. And in 45 days, they claim that the entire earth flooded, right? Or 40 days. That's how long it took. So that volume of water had to shoot out of the earth within 40 days, along with all the heat and the magma and all that shit. And they just roll by that. And then Jamie came into the stream last night and he said, you guys are just incredulous. You just don't want to believe. It's like, no, that's not it. I'm afraid, my friend. It's not that we don't want to believe. It's that we can't believe something that ridiculous.
A bunch of bullshit. Yeah. I was listening to Jamie. Jamie obviously made some comments. I mean, Jamie, what do you think of him? He seems like he's a pretty decent guy. He seems to get along with everybody. He's on all the Christian channels all the time. He's been in battles back and forth because his doctrine is a little bit different, I think. I know he's battled a little bit with Smokey. He's been, a little bit back and forth, but he seems to get along. And I do have to say, I think he's a decent guy. But I basically listening to Amy's stream and listening to him defend that. In my determination, he's a dipshit. I mean, really. Yeah. His defense or what he was claiming or what he thought about the Ark and that whole story, I thought was, like you said, ridiculous. It just, I mean, you got to be a dipshit to believe that stuff, in my opinion. So
I really love that, guys. I really love that
erosion.
Yeah, that was part of it. Yep.
I love that Google always displays the last things that like that I may have searched for or were interested in. And this is probably my most common site right here, the coffee beans. And then I think I searched for some sort of investment advisor about 3 weeks ago. But anyway, thank you, Google, for fucking showing that shit all over the place. But anyway, read this. Tortugan, I believe, is the creation of R.J. Downard. And it's in the Urban Dictionary. And you might want to just read this. Again, somebody want to read that aloud? My voice is failing me.
I can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it? What the fuck?
Well, I mean, I could see it, but I would have to have glasses and.
Oh.
Somebody whose cognitive architecture is dominated by the ability to selectively not think about things they don't want to think about. Brings up subjects they don't work through details of something they think happened, not paying attention to most of the data. When the creationists were presented data and scientific proof that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, they kept their Tortugan attitude and didn't bother to study it.
Right. So let's stop this one, share this one. So if you type in tortugan.com, you come up with, and RJ wrote 2 books, and both of these books are worth their weight in gold as far as resources to deal with young Earth creationists. And everybody should actually go buy that damn book. And we have here, monkey for banana.
Oh, hey guys.
Hey, hi. Hey. So anyway, so if you type in tortugan.com, you come up with Troubles in Paradise, and RJ has he's got all kinds of references and chapters, and I mean he's done a tremendous amount of work. Wow, that page isn't working. It was working last night.
So monkey for bananas, have they put you against the wall and are about to shoot you?
It's not working.
No, this is my prison cell. I used to be Kent used to be my prison boyfriend.
Really?
Inmate number 0645-2-017. Yeah, I'm hoping he quits paying his taxes again so he can come back in here and we can be together again.
So you get to know him quite intimately.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So does he like? Well, I guess I don't want to say imply that you guys were like having sex, but does he ever just like out of the blue say, "Well, you thought everything came from a dot"?
Yeah, actually, that's what he does. When he finishes, he's like, "Oh, evolution is dumb," and then yeah.
And you think he came from a banana? And,
he makes me say well, let's not get into it too much, but essentially I've had to practice my Richard Dawkins impression for him.
Okay.
Yeah, he likes that.
That probably gets him going pretty good.
Yeah, that probably gets him. Yeah, gets him off a little bit. Yep.
Anyway. So I'm gonna link this in the description. Everybody knows about R.J. Downard's books, right? The Rocks Were There.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't purchased it, but yes.
If you drop it on your foot, you will break your foot, and it's because half of it is references. I mean, he's got like 300 pages of references, and he's got a tremendous amount of stuff. That book and his other book, which I forgot the name of, I'm sorry, RJ, which I will look up.
Evolution Slam Dunk.
Yes. Okay, those 2 books have a tremendous amount of information about these creationists and how all this shit got started. He's got a lot of history because his profession is actually a historian. And he does a really good job.
Yeah, he has a BA in history.
Yeah. And he's been doing this for like 20 or more than 20 years, 20 or 30 years. So he was around in the very early, with the early creationists watching them back then, which is kind of an asset. Now, he does a show every Wednesday night at 9:00, and he doesn't get a lot of viewers, and he really should, because he goes through a lot of really good stuff. So anyway, I will try to link all this stuff in the description. But let's see. So I pulled up a bunch of stuff on the physics. The thing is, okay, the thing about a Tortugan is they don't want to dig into the details ever. So what Kent was having a problem with last night is Dr. Dan kept pushing him on details. Like, did the ship leak? How big was the ship? You know, how did the animals fit there? How did they breathe? All this crap. When you hit them on the details, and what I really like to hit them on is a timeline of all this shit. So the flood supposedly happened, at 2400 BC? So it's 4,400 years ago? Was that it?
There's been a new, I've heard a couple of different times from different ones about some new dating method based on, like, they go to the Septuagint and take the dates from there because they say that the Jews changed the chronology of the part of the Old Testament to hide the evidence for Jesus or something like that. Has anybody else heard of that?
So what did they come up with? No, I haven't, but what is it?
Essentially, they just add a few hundred years in there.
Okay.
And they say that makes the population growth curve fit better somehow.
Add a few hundred. Yeah, that ain't going to help them. So basically we got 4,400 years, and in that time we had the whole Tower of Babel thing and the radiation. I think the Tower of Babel, happened like 4 to 600 years after the flood. And then there was this whole radiation, and then somewhere in there was a fucking ice age.
Hey, Speed.
Yeah.
I made a meme for the debate yesterday, and I put the link to it in the private chat if you can maybe show it.
I will work on that immediately.
Thank
you, sir.
It's interesting. So the Ice Age happened after the flood, but then how come there's nothing written down about the Ice Age? And I don't know if any cultures have stories about an Ice Age.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. And the Neanderthals, they also happened. And nobody wrote about the Neanderthals. So
right.
I don't understand. But according to Standing for Truth, when he was on the rare appearance he made on my channel a long time ago, he claimed the entire Neanderthal thing happened in 1,400 years.
Yeah, and that's a bunch of old guys. Kent Hovind will say it's a bunch of old guys because, your brow ridges keep growing the older you get.
Oh yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
And that explains Neanderthal children how.
Yeah. Remember the word Tortugan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here we have Dr. Dan making Kent cry.
Did he actually say that?
Yeah, it was the first thing he said.
Yeah. Well, what it was apparently on his last debate between Kent Hovind and Dr. Dan, Standing for Truth put inmate number 06452-017's name down as Dr. Hovind and put Dan's name down as just Dan without the doctor part. And Dan actually is a doctor. Kent is not.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, how about all the bullshit that happened last night with all the mods in the side chat? You see all that bullshit?
No, what happened?
Tell us about it.
Well, there was, of course, James has been having issues with mods. He's been having issues with moderators for quite a long time because basically is what happens all the time is he lets the Christian, some of these Christians that are real pain in the asses. Praise is one of them. Gavin is another one. Lots of all different people. And it's usually the creationists. He gives these, mod powers to, and then they start acting like asses and, timing people out that shouldn't be timed out. This all hell breaks loose. So he's been trying to straighten this all out for weeks and weeks, probably months. Right. So he's like stripped everybody of all their mods, a lot of the mod people. He stripped away from a lot of people. And then
he stripped everybody.
Yeah.
What he did. Yeah. He said he was going to do a complete reset, take away everybody's wrench, and then you had to go through a process to ensure that you actually understood the rules and remain neutral and everything. And then somebody, I don't know if anybody's confirmed who it was, started giving wrenches back to all the creationists in the chat last night.
Yeah.
Really?
They gave wrenches to Sunflower,
Jesus is
Cheryl.
born.
Yeah, Jill. I mean, Jill, really? He's got to be the worst, right? Yeah, it was a joke, and I guarantee it was praised, but because I have a feeling, James kept saying, "I think I know who it is," but of course he wouldn't say, but I think it was praise who did it. So there's like 5. James said there's 5 people that have whatever administrative powers or whatever on his on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he didn't give any of these people wrenches. They just started getting them somehow.
Yeah. So
people
one
were
of
asking
those
if he was
5
hacked
people, one of those 5 people that have access to his channel were giving out wrenches, and I'm telling you, I guarantee it was praise based on the people he was giving it to.
Red Fang in the chat says it was praise. Red Fang, do you have I don't know, is that just a like do you have any more evidence of that, or I don't want to, you know what I mean, like I don't know either way, so
no,
I don't want to say for sure it was somebody if I don't know.
Have solid evidence of that, but I guarantee it was him. And I'm sure James will keep it quiet. He'll just say, "Oh, I got it all straightened out," whatever. But you can just tell based on the people that he gave wrenches to, you can just tell it was praise, and I'm sure it was.
Okay, Red Fang in the chat says it was praise. He said he was going to give Jill his mod powers back.
Yep.
So, there we go. It was praise.
Sure enough. Yep. Well, I mean, I blame it on James. James is giving somebody like praise, administrative powers. Like, why would you do that? What was the reason for that? A person like him. He's already shown that he can't be trusted because James has had problems with him before. And he turned around and did it again. So it's James's fault. He did it, He knows how praise is. He knows him well enough that he should have never done that. And that's the kind of shit you're gonna get.
Red Fang said praise said it on his video yesterday that he was going to do it.
Yep. There you go. Sure enough, I knew it was him.
I kept hearing it was probably him, but I didn't want to assert it was him without knowing. But now we know.
Yeah, they don't even try to hide their trolling these days.
Yep. Yeah, that was bad.
I had somebody attempt to sign into my Google account, after my debate with SD where Praise was moderating it. I don't know if that was just a coincidence or not, but it was kind of odd that as soon as right after my debate, I had somebody trying to sign into my account.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. What did you think of your debate with SFT?
Well, I did think it was well moderated. I wish I had been a little more prepared to refute some of the genetic arguments. It's kind of frustrating because he does sound like he really knows what he's talking about, but a lot of the points he kept bringing up, it's like, wait a minute, I just watched these things get thoroughly debunked in another video.
Yep.
And the one where I feel like when he brought up the thing about the human Y chromosome being more closer to gorillas than chimpanzees, I feel bad that I didn't think of the answer intuitively on my own. But it also shows how kind of dishonest he is, because all you have to do is just Google human chimpanzees or human Y chromosome compared to gorillas and chimpanzees. You click on the first link and it explains perfectly why that's the case.
Right.
There's nothing. It doesn't refute the standard model of evolution in any way. Essentially, all it is that humans are closer to gorillas and other great apes in our Y chromosome in certain ways than chimpanzees. And it's not because humans are so different. It's because chimpanzees are the odd man out there. Their Y chromosome has underwent extensive selective pressure because they're so non-monogamous compared to other great apes, then that you have so much sperm from so many different males and one female, and the better ones went out, and that leads to a faster diversification rate of the Y chromosome, and that's also confirmed by looking at the different subspecies in the genus Pan. They all have highly divergent Y chromosomes from each other.
Yeah, and he likes to bring up satellite DNA in the same way, because satellite DNA in primates in some branches has gone completely crazy. It keeps multiplying. The satellite DNA gets duplicated very easily, and it's also very, very difficult to research because it is so similar. What's
satellite DNA?
Okay, it's like the satellite DNA, like in the centromere of each chromosome. Okay, there is these repetitive sequences, right? Mm-hmm. And they just repeat so that basically they're used in the centromere of a chromosome. Okay, mm-hmm. That's one thing. But then there's also satellite DNA regions where you'll have repeats from 6 to 192 nucleotides. And they keep repeating over and over and over again. So they keep getting recopied into the DNA, and it's called satellite DNA. And up until very recently, we didn't have any really good means of finding out exactly where it was. So they did a bunch of studies on primates, and they found that primates had, some of them, the satellite DNA had just gone duplication crazy, right? So they had a hell of a lot more. I think the chimpanzees were a little bit. They were again the odd man out, where they had a lot of duplication. So it's really difficult to make that argument. But he uses it like to compare chimpanzees to humans.
Is that the argument that their genome is larger than humans, therefore they're not related?
Yeah. So
because humans themselves can have different sizes of their genome.
Yeah,
within humans, yeah.
If you compare chimpanzees to humans and you don't do a proper alignment of the genes, if you do a proper alignment of the genes, you come up with like 98% similar. Mm-hmm. What they did at the Creation Institute or whatever is they didn't align it. They compared all the DNA, right? Which you can't fucking do between species. You can't even do that between two human beings. You
essentially
need sequences.
It'd be like if we take two different books, right, and they to try to see if they're saying the same thing, and then as soon as they diverge, you count that as them being two different books.
Right. You keep counting. Yeah.
Even though, so like one book might have a paragraph that's different than the other, but then they're essentially the same after that. But once you count that paragraph, then everything after that paragraph you count as wrong because it's in the wrong place.
Yeah, if you add a comma to one addition,
right,
and then every character after that is not going to match. It's basically, they do something very similar to that, and they come up with 93% difference or similarity or something.
So,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think like 88% is like the one they try to throw around or something. I think that's what Neff was trying to argue with me on.
Yeah. Yep.
Our debate.
So DNA is basically it's tandem repeats, or just repeats of the same DNA over and over and over again.
Right.
When DNA duplicates, it's very, like when there's a break of some sort, it's very hard to realign them without creating more duplicates. So they keep growing, kind of like viruses. It's almost like a built-in virus. So there's a lot of that going on. He also uses that in his chromosome 2 argument. And his other favorite argument is the retroviruses, human endogenous retroviruses. And he implies that just because they found like a half dozen of them that are actually functional, because they've been around for 60 million or 100 million years, basically in the genome, and they have evolved to have some functionality in the placenta. Basically, he implies that all of them are functional, and that is hardly the case.
You saw my debate, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel like I did a decent job of refuting that point? in the debate, or done any work on that?
I can't remember how you refuted that point particularly, but I thought overall you did as well as you could if you weren't prepared for SFT, because SFT he's a paper after paper after paper gish galloper, right?
Right.
So every point you come up with, he's going to create 10 new points, and then at the very end he throws down a piece of bait for you, and then I
do think he is one of the more intelligent creationists.
He's one of the better debaters as far as how much he knows. I wouldn't give him too much credit because he knows the surface. He doesn't even really understand how alleles and loci work in the genome, as far as I can tell. He has been, I think he maybe understands it now, but he refuses to take it. He refuses to operate as if he actually knows what the fuck because what he is saying about created heterozygosity doesn't make any sense if you really understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I was wanting to talk about that because it didn't seem right to me. Because my question about created heterozygosity is like, I understand heterozygosity in a population, right? Yeah. Yep. But when you have just a single pair, or how do you have that much heterozygosity in one individual?
Right, you can't.
Right.
Yeah, you can have for any locus in the genome, which is where gene exists, right? You have no more than 2 copies of one individual. You got one from mom, and you got one from dad. So that's all the heterozygosity you could have. With Adam and Eve, you can only have 4. Okay. Now he implies that God front-loaded the entire genome with tons of heterozygous, a whole bunch of alleles. Allele simply means that the gene is different. It means other. So I think it's called it's short for allele something or another. But anyway, so he implies that there's all these other copies of the genes, and somehow they can move around in the genome so that you can end up with a heterozygous population. Like in our population, for some gene, we could have as many as 100 or even more variants of that one gene, but that is at that particular locus. So that gene,
he was trying to imply that it's spread throughout the genome, and I'm thinking that doesn't seem right.
Dr. Dan wants to come in and go over some of this. Can you throw out a link?
Oh my God! You mean Dr.
And I
Dan?
think Andrew too. Andrew and.
Well, I sent Doc. I think I sent Andrew an invite, but he just ignores me lately.
Yeah, no, they're discussing stuff in chat, and I think they want to come in and
come on in,
go over some of this stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I would ask.
Nessel's here too. Yeah, there you go.
Dr. Dan, he read my mind when Kent said that the Egyptians exaggerate the age of their pharaohs, and I was shouting at the screen, and then Dan said exactly what I was thinking.
Hey, Dr. Dan.
Hey, everybody. How's everyone doing?
Good to meet you.
Good job last night. That was fun to watch. Yep. I love the expressions on your face. You were just like, what the hell?
We love the little digs that you're able to sneak in there. We love those.
We were talking on another stream last night about how it seemed like, on your first debate, you kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt and tried to argue as if he's arguing in good faith, and then this debate, you more or less just try to make him look. I noticed Professor Dave did the same thing. I think a lot of people do that. They have this kind of naive idea that they're going to come in and have a rational discussion with him. So the first time it's not as entertaining. The second time they realize that it's just about mocking him because that's all he actually deserves.
Yeah, I deliberately threw a couple elbows last night that I didn't throw the first time because, it's Kent, so that's what we're going to do. But I wanted to come in because y'all were talking about created heterozygosity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I love that argument. Makes no goddamn sense.
Yep.
There's nothing about it that makes sense.
Yeah, I asked Standing for Truth how he distinguishes between differences in populations that came about as a result of mutation versus things that are created heterozygosity, and he just said, well, if it's beneficial, it's probably created heterozygosity, and if it's rare or not beneficial, then it's probably not. Like,
okay, it's not useful to anybody. That standard.
It's because he can't admit beneficial mutations, even though beneficial mutations are context specific.
Yes. So, Dr. Dan, am I correct in standing for truth? He seems to be implying that there are genes at other locations that somehow end up being put into one location and becoming and explaining the heterozygosity in the population, right?
So I have to say that I have stopped trying to understand what SFT's arguments are because they don't make any sense. So if I'm going to try to make sense of a created heterozygosity argument, there's a whole chapter on this in Jeanson's book, Replacing Darwin. Sanford and Carter and some other guy have a paper on it, and they go through kind of the same basic ideas. Their model is a little bit different from Jeanson's, but so I go to those sources because at the very least they're trying to be coherent, whereas rando YouTube creationists are basically just throwing jargon at the wall and trying to obfuscate without actually considering whether the first sentence they say contradicts the second sentence they say.
Right. The Tortugan.
So I don't, but for if you look at Jeanson's model, for example, he is, he, in not so many words, he kind of does a little bait and switch where he talks about that you can get a lot of combinations of different alleles between genes. So you can get if you have a bunch of alleles for gene A and a bunch of alleles for gene B, you can mix and match those in lots of different combinations. But what he doesn't go into is how you get lots of variants of the same gene starting from, 2 or 4 or 6, or if you go from the ARC, 12 maximum ancestral alleles, right? So because you need recombination within the gene. And the example I love for this is the ABO blood group, which I mentioned last night, it makes up, it's less than 1/5000th of the chromosome that it's located on. And you get about 1 recombination per chromosome per generation. And the recombinations are actually biased against occurring within a gene.
Within a gene, right.
So you need even if you assume they're equally distributed along the chromosome, you need 2.8 million recombination events, assuming each recombination event gets you 2 new alleles and you never lose one, ever. There's no drift, there's no selection, ever. So bat poop ridiculously assumptions. You need 2.8 million recombination events to get the variation you need in that gene, because there's over 1,000 variants of that gene. Yeah. And then how many you have, your compressed time frame from 4,400 years ago. So how many it's 200 some odd generations. So then how many lineages do you need? It's way more lineages that you can get because you had 6 people leaving. It doesn't work. It's just there's no way to make the numbers work. And Jeanson digs his own grave on this one because he says all the variation is due to recombination rather than mutations. You can make it a less bad argument by allowing mutations, but then you're allowing functional mutations, and young Earth creationists can't do that. You can't allow functional mutations because that ruins a bunch of other arguments. So you're constricted to just recombination, and we can directly observe recombination rates. Unless someone's proposing some shenanigans in the past with recombination rates, like you're doing with, radioactive decay or something to make that work, you can't do it. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no way to make the argument work.
So there's 1,000 variants in the entire gene, including the introns.
This is just exons. It's within the ABO gene. There are over 1,000 so there's the 3 main alleles, right? There's A, B, and O, and then there's tons of SNPs within those 3 alleles. So there's over 1,000 variants of that gene that you'll find
in the exon. So the rarity of recombination event that's going to slice an exon. That's going to be pretty.
Because they're tiny.
Yeah,
exons are 1% of the gene, 2%. Yeah. They're tiny, right? It's you have a gene that's 10,000 bases. That's going to be mostly introns. It's going to be a really tiny polypeptide.
Yeah. Yep. So it just.
I think he made the. Sorry, go ahead. I guess SFT made the argument that he also made the argument that, like, on Creation Week, it only talks about there being 2 humans. You know, the other animals, and there have been more individuals created. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. The Ark entirely destroys that
bottleneck.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happened before the flood. You go through a bottleneck 4,400 years ago, and that resets everything.
But they say, well, it wasn't long enough for the harmful mutations to build up before the Ark or some stupid thing.
After the debate, I looked at a little bit of the physics of the flood, and I got a whole bunch of books here on by creationists about the flood, and man, they've got some really strange ideas. And the amount of water that had to come up out of the earth in 40 days just kind of blows the whole thing all to hell. Because it had to be 4 times as much as it is in the ocean now. That's how much water came up out of the earth.
They'll propose that the continents, cause they'll be like, well, there is enough water to cover the entire earth with like 2 miles of water if you assume that the entire surface is smooth, right? Like there's no mountains or anything.
Yeah.
That then you have the problem of, well, how do you have all these mountains forming without massive amounts of heat being released? You can't just go shoving huge piles of dirt around without heat.
Well, there's water coming up out of the deep from some goddamn place. And there's continents flying around at 45 miles an hour, splitting apart, smashing into each other, pushing up Everest high mountains. And all of this is going on, and that Ark is just kind of bobbing back and forth there. With its moonwell or whatever he come up with last night.
It's the moonpool and the drogue stones.
Well, he was also suggesting that the Ark would be wherever on Earth the stuff wasn't happening, like
global.
The Ark went over to Alabama to what is that?
Everest was forming. Well, so the Ark went over.
Can't block anything if there's no mountains.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Dan, how are you doing?
Hey, Andrew. Hey, I caught your conversation on phylogenetics the other day, and that was spot on. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Oh, thank you.
I think that was on Tuesday. It was when I was sitting in the car. I was at a car repair. I had a car repair thing. I was sitting in the waiting room, but I was listening, and it was really good.
Thank you.
One on my channel?
No, it was here. It was on the weather report a couple days ago.
Okay.
I think that was on Tuesday.
And me and Andrew did a stream on phylogenetics with Jackson Wheat after the weather report the other day.
That one I did not catch.
Okay. Well, yeah, you should watch that one too. It was pretty good.
I'll check that out. Thank you.
So, Dr. Dan, since you mentioned phylogenetics, I was hoping you could clarify something about phylogenetics for me. So I've heard this term bootstrapping, and I've asked some phylogeneticists about it, and I kind of understand it, but I need some clarification. Like, could you give me a summary of how it works?
Absolutely. Real briefly, it's a technique to check how robust your conclusions are and whether they are basically being based on a small subset of your data versus being in concordance with all of your data. So the way bootstrapping works is you have 1,000 sequences, right? And each one might be 1,000 nucleotides, right? So what you do is, and you build your phylogeny out of that. And then what you do is you take subsets of your sequence alignment. So you have your sequences, they're all aligned, right? So the parts match up. What you do is you take subsets of that. You either remove parts of it or you just base your phylogeny on subsets. So instead of taking the full 1,000, maybe you'll take a shifting window of like 900 bases, right? And you'll just do like shifting windows. Or you'll take like little bits out. You'll remove, like, let's remove base number 1 and do it again. Okay, put that back. Now remove base number 2 and do it again, right? So you're taking subsets of your data. And what you want to do is see for each branch point, for each node in your phylogeny, how many times out of, what fraction of subsets of data does that node still resolve the same way, right? So if you have a tree and you have a node that has like a 99 or 98 next to it, that says, okay, 98% of the time, no matter what subset of the data you take, you still get that same node. So that node is robust, right? Like it's not being unduly biased by a small subset of your data. That's like maybe there's outliers that are causing a specific branch point to appear that's being weighted maybe too heavily. It's robust. In contrast, if you have a node, then you bootstrap it and it's like 40 or 50, you're like,
right.
You shouldn't be too confident in that because it only works for some subsets of your data and not others. So it might just be happenstance based on what you're sampling that's causing that node to appear on your tree relative to like actually reflecting what your data,
So bootstrapping doesn't always refer to replacing certain columns of the alignment and coming up with a set that's equivalent to the size of the original data set. Like it's just taking subsets of it? I'm not exactly sure what you mean. So you're replacing like columns of your alignment? I mean, kind of? Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. Like, because the way I often see it is you have your alignments and sequences, and then one character state, which would be a nucleotide, you would change that randomly with other characters from the same matrix, and you would just keep replacing those and seeing how much the tree, I guess, how stable it is, basically, like you said, assigning bootstrap value.
That's a good way to describe. It's right. You're seeing how that's a really good phrase. You're seeing how stable it is with. I always it's subsets is how I'm familiar with doing it. Is you're taking parts of your data. You're taking parts of your data set instead of the whole data set, right? What are we looking at here? Bootstrap confidence levels in phylogenetic trees. There you go.
Linked in the description, by the way. Okay.
Yeah. So the idea is you're making trees out of instead of your entire data set, fractions of your data set, right? Instead of your whole 1,000 base alignment, maybe you're using 900 or 990 or 500, whatever, right? You're taking a subset and seeing if you get the same tree. And if you generate the same tree the vast majority of the time, then that's a test of robustness, right? So you can be confident that the tree you generated, given the parameters that you're using to make the trees, that those answers to the question of how are these things related, that those answers are like relatively reasonable given your data.
Okay, that makes sense. My other quick question was unrelated to phylogenetics, and it was just because we were talking about genetic entropy in the chat, and I just want to know, because I haven't specifically mentioned genetic entropy to the professors I've talked to. Of course,
none of them will know what it means.
Right.
Literally, none of them will know that phrase because it's made up.
Right. They have mentioned the things we've talked about, like Moore's ratchet, for instance, and I ask about that because one of them did mention that probably most mutations in populations are slightly deleterious, and I want to know if you agree with that, or what do you think they meant?
In terms of how you define deleterious, so you could possibly say deleterious if you define them biochemically, but when evolutionary biologists use the term deleterious, we're talking about fitness effects. And so like that's a quantifiable thing. Does it affect your reproductive output? And that's the definition of fitness. And that's like the definition of deleterious. And mutations, the vast majority of mutations are neutral by that measure. Like creationists want to redefine fitness to be about anything except reproductive output. And like you could use other words for that stuff. Use competitiveness, use biochemical efficiency, like just use some other term that's fine. And if you think that other term, right, if creationists think that other term should be the standard that people use instead of fitness, then that's fine. But like they have to make that argument. They can't just redefine the term fitness.
I mean, the thing is, if you start with the idea that a genome is perfectly created, then any deviation from that would have to be deleterious. So.
Yep. But as Atheist Jr. said earlier, that's all those terms are context specific anyway. You know, there's very few things you could point to and go, that is bad in an absolute sense, right? You know, there's certain enzymes, like you need them. If you break your DNA, your main DNA polymerases, like you're going to have a problem. That's bad more or less across the board, right? If your DNA polymerases are not functioning. There's some things like that. But most of the variation that could potentially have fitness effects is only going to have fitness effects in specific contexts. And what those fitness effects are will be specific to the context. So to label most mutations as inherently X or Y or Z is a category error. You can't do that. Now, I should say you can't do that for mutations that have some kind of biochemical change, right? For mutations that, like, in the middle of an intron that don't do anything, like, this is neutral, nothing doing anything, you can characterize that as neutral. For mutations that have, like, they change an amino acid, the effects of that change are going to be context specific.
Okay. I think that lends me to believe that what they were saying was referring to, because they did provide the analogy earlier of like changing a computer and or taking random wiring and changing it and seeing what happens. So maybe they were referring to the mutations tending to be deleterious as a likelihood. I'm not exactly sure. I'm gonna have to reread it.
I don't know. It sounds like more like a biochemical thing than an evolution thing.
They also compare it to rust building up on a car, like the bad.
Yeah, I love that one. It's just rust building up on a car. Yeah. Like organisms are not cars.
Yeah, they love talking about cars for some reason.
Don't. That's pointless. Yeah. That's not what that is. It's these are populations of individuals that are experiencing selection, and cars do not do that. Don't select for cars. Cars don't reproduce.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, it's so obvious that, you know, if as humans our genome is, or if they say that all genomes are deteriorating, right? But that you know, mutation rates, you know, it's based on generation times. So if as you know, with how long a human generation is, if we're in any danger from this, then mice should be extinct. You know, bacteria should be extinct. Nothing with that long of a generation time could live for 6,000 years.
The funny thing about that is they'll actually address that argument, or try to address that argument, by saying the population context is different from them because they have such large populations and such fast generation times that selection actually is able to operate there because they have such large populations. And in that regard, creationists, the people that say this, I've heard Rob Carter say this, for example, that's correct. Larger populations means selection is going to be more efficient, right? And since, you know, bacteria or mice have larger populations, and for mice, it's actually questionable whether they have larger populations than humans, I think. I don't know what the global population of mice is, but I think they mean like generations. You know, you have more kids typically than humans do. So they make this argument about, well, given those populations, given that population structure, then selection can occur, and you'll have individuals that are higher fitness and lower fitness, and you could select for the better ones, and that will allow the species to be sustainable. To which I reply, exactly, yes, that's the argument I'm making. You're agreeing with me. Now we're just arguing over the parameters. Now you need to do the population genetics to show that what you say happens in humans actually happens. Because once you concede that it's not a universal, now you're locked into doing the math on a species by species basis. Good luck with that.
Yep. That's cool.
Well, I'm wondering if the genome is deteriorating, or, you know, genetic entropy is a thing. Why have human lifespans gotten so much higher in the past 100 years or so? Shouldn't they be any lower?
They'll claim that
worse.
And they'll try to tell you that in biblical times they lasted a lot longer, 1,000 years.
Yeah, they plot that line. That's a big thing they've been putting out now, is that they take like the ages of the patriarchs and plot them over time and show that it's like a negative exponential curve.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what?
Has anybody actually looked into that? Like,
no, in one of their books yesterday, I would have to find it again. I've got like 4 or 5 books on creation and the flood. And one of them, they showed a plot of the ages in biblical times, and it didn't look anything like that exponential curve that they're now using. It was a whole lot more stacked on one end. So I got to find that again and show it to you.
Right. Well, it seems, I mean, there's only like like maybe a couple dozen people at the most. I don't know how many people are listed in the Bible that give specific ages, but it can't be more than like. Does anybody have a rough number?
They didn't have enough sample points to put that
exactly.
curve up. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, you can't make you have a sample size of like maybe a dozen people. Like, how does that?
I'm gonna scoot in just a couple minutes, but one last point I want to make for everybody here, and everyone watching is that, like, do you all see how silly these arguments sound to like actual biologists? It's not like genetic entropy, created heterozygosity. Like, none of this stuff is serious. This is
no.
None of this stuff is meant to be taken seriously by people who they claim to be trying to convince, right? Jeanson writes a whole book called Replacing Darwin, and the arguments are transparently unserious. And like, you've got people, like Kent or, SFT, who was in the chat and then wasn't in the chat. What a coincidence. And, they have a lot of jargon, throw a lot of big words, sometimes don't know what all those words mean, but there's no attempt to actually seriously engage with like the fields of population genetics or biogeography or any of this stuff. It's just like made up propaganda to you're preaching to the choir to like bolster the confidence of people who are already on your side. It's
apologetics, not science.
It's not meant to be serious. It's not meant to be persuasive. And we should all approach this discussion from that perspective, right? Like, you are not, if you're having a conversation with one of these people, they're not trying to make an argument that is reasonable to someone who understands population genetics. That's not the point. And it's not so like any evaluation on those grounds is going to take 30 seconds and show that it's just silly. And, tonight, sorry, shameless plug, doing a video on the waiting time problem tonight with some people. And like, it's amateur hour and we're looking at stuff by Rob Carter and by Ann Gauger and Gunther Beckley. And it's amateur hour. It's not serious arguments, but like, these are the professionals, because that's not the point. Convincing me isn't the point. Sounding reasonable to me is not the point. And we should all just like,
the problem is that once the average person hears too many words they don't understand, they lose the ability to, keep track of the argument.
And that's why it's incumbent upon us to make the counter arguments like very simple and straightforward, that not just like, here's the technical reason you're wrong, but here's the surface reason why you're silly. Like, start there. Like this, like, you're not off by 10%. You're off by 3 orders of magnitude. Like, everybody can understand that.
I think that's the reason that SFT has videos that are 4 hours long too. You want to overwhelm people, Yeah.
So I've got a book called Rock Solid Answers by Michael Ord and John Reed. And on the in the first article in the book, he says something kind of interesting. He's talking about, I think this is called a context.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Speed.
Okay, bye. A context for the flood geology debate. So, and he says, but when we examine this closely, the philosophy becomes clear. The nature of time is a question to be resolved by philosophy or theology, not by science. So right away, he's rejecting the idea that we can use radiocarbon dating or radiometric dating or any other means of determining the age of the Earth. He's claiming it's a theological or a philosophical problem, because he makes a point in this entire book that we have the data, and our interpretation of the data relies on our theology or our philosophy, which is simply not the case when it comes to the science of the age of the Earth. But they're trying to discount it all the way through.
Yeah, well, I mean, another thing I hear often is like, well, God obviously didn't, made Adam with like a full beard, so God can create things that look old. So the Earth that on Creation Week has like fully formed soil horizons and sedimentary layers and things, and it's like, well, if you're gonna push that point, then just why even bother trying to figure it out? God could have made it at any time.
Magic could be invoked at any time in the story, but the new creationist wants to use science to prove God. So basically, they're trying to prove God with science, and they're trying to prove that evolution is false with the science of evolution or biology. So that's their whole point now. So they can't invoke magic because they have this new requirement for themselves that they have to do it with science, which is a really interesting turn of events. I mean, all they would have to do is go to church, shut their goddamn mouth, shut down their YouTube channel, and accept the fact that God created a little magical island of calm water around the flood, and he magically packed all those animals into the flood, and everything would be fine. But they don't want to do that because they insist that modern science is proving them right. And that's the narrative that they're presenting, and that's the narrative that we're fighting against, basically, because they're essentially trying to turn science upside down in order to believe in God or find a reason to believe in God. And that is just really seriously concerning. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and the real uneducated ones you talk about Kent. Look at the things that Kent said. Oh, you believe in, everything came from a dot, and you believe that, humans were made from rocks, and, and those little stupid things that these guys say, permeates out into the far less uneducated ones that,
fish to fishermen, pots come to people.
Yeah, and then they believe that's I don't know. It's Yeah,
it was interesting when Jamie came into Amy's room last night, and what was the first thing that he said?
Yeah, I listened. I watched it. I can remember a lot of his arguments were really bad, but I can't remember. Yeah,
I actually didn't get to watch the whole debate yet. I watched Dan's opening statement, and I watched the tail end of the debate.
Was the first thing he said hello?
The first thing Jamie said? Probably hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. I'll share the screen here. We will share the screen and we'll take a look. But it was interesting to me what he said. I don't know. The way he said it. And he was so confident. Let me see
really.
here.
I guess
I got to change
Atheist Jr. said the president of the Board of Education of Texas when he was in high school said that evolution claims that nothing created a spider from a rock.
he really said that, huh?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah,
he's proof that dentists have way too much spare time.
Okay, I think this might have been it right here.
I invented young Earth creationism, just so you know, and I just think you guys are just a bunch of incredulous disbelievers that don't even try.
Wait, so you are a creationist? Oh man, that's
anyway. So that was his opening, and he admitted to being hyperbolic, right? But it's sort of like, isn't that exactly what we think of them when it comes to them trying to understand how something evolved? And then,
I might have been. I got Jamie to call me an asshole. I don't know if I was really, I might have been a little bit harsh.
Last night.
Yeah, he apologized afterwards.
So Amy called who an asshole?
No. Jamie, the young Earth creationist there.
Okay.
I was just shutting down everything he said. Like there were some things I was like, dude, that's just bullshit. And then he called me an asshole, and I didn't even hear it. But then later on, he apologized for that. I'm like, dude, it's all right. So I don't know. Maybe I was a little too harsh on him. I don't know.
I had to listen to his whole thing. There's a part I bookmarked.
The slowest measured rate of erosion on Earth is about, I want to say, 1 millimeter per 1,000 years. That's like.
Okay, he's basically saying that if he grants us the very slowest erosion rate, that the entire geological column would have eroded in so many years, right? That's kind of what his argument was. Completely ignoring the fact that, you have erosion and sedimentation. The most important thing to understand about them is gravity. you get erosion at the top of mountains, right? And everything's flowing down, and then it creates sediments in valleys. And then from there, you have all sorts of other things happening, which you guys rightly pointed out, like volcanic extrusions. You have plates, subducting plates and lifting mountain ranges, and just all sorts of tipping and fracturing and all that going on. And their argument is that if the Earth had just been sitting there, right, and somehow we had sediments already, they all would have eroded away before now, which is, I mean, what is he thinking? He was talking about how the entire geological column would have eroded away. I mean, that makes no sense whatever. The geological column, the column was put together in different places by sedimentation, and it varies all over the place, right? And then all hell broke loose for 4.5 billion years of lifting and plates moving around and all of that. And it just doesn't make sense to say that the mountains would have worn down by now, because they're assuming like a uniformitarianism that no geologist would assume. So anyway, it was kind of ridiculous. But that's as far as I went. So I got to watch the rest of what he said.
Mountains do wear down kind of cyclically, but they make more. It's like laced potato chips. Go ahead, wear them down, but we'll make more.
Like I think in Minnesota here, I think we had this the Laurentian Mountains or something like that going up into Canada, and I think they were like 5-6 miles high, and they actually wore down over the years. But all of that wearing down of that mountain range ended up as sediment somewhere else and became part of the
what's that ring of volcanoes in Washington and Oregon? They wear down in about 2 million years. They found remains, of mountains that were volcanic mountains that just wore down, and they're no more. But Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens eventually came up in their place.
Well, the mountains we have here in Oklahoma are essentially the remnants of a massive range that was the size of the Rockies, several 100 million years ago.
Yeah, and all that sediment goes somewhere and accumulates and forms those sedimentary layers that are part of the geological column, right?
And then other mountain ranges are still rising today. The Himalayas grow every year.
Yeah.
What's going on? We talking about Noah's flood again?
About what?
Yeah, that's part. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, the Grand Canyon and like erosion and sedimentary layers, and I thought, oh shit.
The Grand Canyon is their favorite place to talk about. That's about all they ever talk about, and they leave out a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I honestly don't even care about the whole boat and or knowing anything. I really want to talk about like the Nephilim, because a lot of them think that those things are aliens or something like that. And I just think it's funny with all the so-called UFO reports and stuff like that. It's funny to pick the brains of nutcases like that.
What does Nephilim think about aliens?
Who, Nephilim freak?
Yeah.
He thinks that they're aliens and that they're succubuses that come to him at night and try to have sex or some weird shit.
Oh man,
I'm not even memeing about that. That's like real, dude. Like, I remember Secular Opinion had a video out where these guys are literally talking about it, and he brought up the the scientific explanation behind it, sleep paralysis, right? Like, just you just feel an entity that's on top of you, controlling you. Like that's the case for things like demon attacks and UFO abductions, yada yada yada. Yeah, he literally went into detail about how this demon was touched him and feeling him and doing all this weird shit, and he went just uber. He was perverted as fuck with the description. It's like it was damn near cringe.
Where is Andrew Cumming, rational empiricist. He should be in here to hear this because he frequently goes on his stream and tries to reason with this guy. And the other night he went on there, and I swear Nephilim was getting drunker and drunker as the stream went on, because I'm pretty sure Nephilim's drinking again. And he's not exactly admitting it, because he said, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, and then I heard a bottle open, and I heard a can opener fall on the tables.
The drinking is part for it, of course. I am telling you, the way you make this guy rage quit on you real quick, remind him how much of a perv he is. Like back in the day, this motherfucker was going around talking about sexual harassing women, like David Letterman style, talking about, oh, I like being petted. Oh yeah, I want some of that. Like and like he also was looking up hookers in San Francisco and all this stuff. Man,
he shared his screen one time. He shared his screen one time, and somebody noticed one of the tabs that he had on there was for a site where you find escorts.
Dumb bastard.
Yeah, I saw that. So he's famous enough to get on Rational Wiki as the creator of the Bukkake Moon.
Yeah, hypothesis. I remember. I didn't know until just recently that he was even still around. I remember back, about 10 years ago when Thunderfoot was dunking on him all the time. But I'd kind of forgotten about him until my debate with him.
I think TJ Kirk talked to him one time on Drunken Peasants with G-Man.
Yeah, Vesta's got it right here on the erosion thing. Yeah, they approach things. I don't know. It's that whole Tortugan thing. They don't want to analyze it in sufficient detail. They only analyze anything like a paper only far enough to get the point they want to support the conclusion that they already have. And it drives me kind of crazy. And then they accuse us of doing the same thing with assuming deep time and evolution and all of that.
Right. Well, I noticed, I thought it was curious, and I pointed this out, that he started out, saying there was all this evidence for a global flood. And then he immediately flipped to trying to prove, trying to point out the so-called problems with the standard model.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you just made a positive claim. Now you're trying to switch around and critique the mainstream science. Like, that's
right. Well, they do the same thing when they read a paper. They'll come up with their cherry pick quote, and then you point out to them that the rest of the paper completely disagrees with you, and completely runs against that. And then they'll say, "Oh, well, they're biased, or they're not doing good science, or there's something wrong with them." Well, if there's something wrong with them, then why is the cherry pick quote valid? I mean, if they're not doing good science, why are you reading anything they say at all?
Yeah. Redefine Living kept quote mining Richard Dawkins, and somebody called him out on it in the chat. And the excuse they often go to is like, well, this is just example of these evolutionists accidentally admitting what they really believe.
Yep.
Yeah, this is exactly. I mean, it's bullshit like this that just reminds us that China's going to dominate space, and we're just going to be on Earth flinging shit at each other with this bullshit.
Yeah.
So we're literally arguing like fucking legendary stories there, as opposed to actually like teaching people like critical thinking and fucking.
Well, on the other hand, though, I mean, I have learned a lot of that, of real science in the process of doing this. So,
well, that's what I was saying. The reason we do this is, and the wonderful thing about them is that they drive our education. Basically, they're driving education among a lot of people that wouldn't ordinarily seek that kind of education. So it's really interesting. So the creationists, they're kind of a blessing. The only thing that worries me about them is we could get along with just a couple of hundred of them, right? And we could have fun. But according to some polls, 38% of the people in this country think the Earth is less than 10,000 years old, and that worries the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, and also 50% of them also believed in January 6th being an actual thing. That's why they organized for it. Who's that guy that said there was a sucker born every minute? P.T. Barnum.
I think so.
Okay.
What was it that you said that 50% of people believe in?
15% of Americans believed in that QAnon conspiracy theory.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
January 6th.
15%?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Or is that of Americans or of Republicans?
Of Americans.
Of Americans. Yeah.
My dad was into the QAnon thing when it first came out.
most of them were obviously Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like the whole theory posited that Trump is a hero of Western civilization, and those who are opposed against his administration were satanic pedophiles, and they stole the election, so they had to rally and do all that shit.
Well, what's weird is like up until Trump came along, these conspiracy types, your Alex Jones types and whatever, they were generally against whoever was in power, no matter which side they were on. So like when Bush was in, they were accusing him of being behind 9/11 and everything, and then of course they had all these things behind Obama. But then Trump comes along, and because he also believes in some wacky conspiracies, they saw him as one of them, and I don't know. It's like,
oh, did you catch that thing? I think it was yesterday, where Biden was he was talking about Putin, and he started out saying Putin. He started saying, he almost said Trump instead of Putin. That was funny. That was on Colbert. So I got an interesting book here I found in my library, Dictionary of Christianity and Science. And it has over 140 leading international scholars talking about some really strange shit. So we could look stuff up maybe in this book. I don't know. The Genesis Flood, the global view. Got a big, huge section on it. So,
is it true that people used to think that women had one less rib than men? Or no, men had fewer ribs than women?
I think so.
Yeah.
I remember my mom telling me that, and then I told her it wasn't correct, and she. Okay.
Somebody started counting them. Hugh Ross. There's a whole lot of interesting stuff in here. Quantum interpretation of quantum theory, pseudoscience. Ooh, I don't know.
Is this a book produced by a Christian or by?
It seems like it has a creationist bent to it. So
okay.
It was in the section of my library which collects dust, which has about 40 creationist books in it. So I don't know why I put it there, but I have to take a look and see what I think. The basic science of climate change.
There's a lot of these creationist books I'd like to check out, but I don't want to give them any money.
I know it's a problem. I have given them money, and I'm so ashamed, but I had to have the books.
Try getting them from like public libraries.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you could. They got an article called "Climate Change: Global Warming View," and Christianity and the ideas which lay behind it is a religion and philosophy of creation. I don't know. What do they say? I'll have to check this out and see if it's real or not. I'm not sure. I got another book called Genesis Flood by Whitcomb. And another one, I got all the Answers books, 1 through 4, and they have some stuff on the flood.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's to my understanding with the whole climate change deal is that they're generally opposed to at least like those on the religious right because, they think that, God has all the power and stuff like that. And because he promised they wouldn't destroy the world by a flood, that man can't do shit because God has all the power. Even though they we also have domain over the land. So I mean, like they just take interpretation, just roll with that shit and use it to, influence public policy and do stupid shit.
Well, that's why the rapture apocalyptic type thinking is so dangerous at the end times thing is because if you don't, if you think everything's just going to be destroyed soon, then you're going to have no incentive to respect the earth and not just trash it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I had one person tell me when Trump got elected that he was. I was talking about how worried I was that Trump wasn't going to be able to handle international affairs. That he didn't have any experience, right? And he sort of implied that a nuclear holocaust might be a good thing because of Armageddon, because it would bring about Armageddon. And this was a Republican friend of mine who's also a real strong Bible supporter. So I was appalled.
Oh yeah, I'm really into psychology and stuff like that, and I've looked at studies in cognitive science that says that with the rise of social media, our natural impulse as a species to form patterns and just see things that aren't really there due to what was that one thing?
Pareidolia.
Huh?
Pareidolia?
Close, but what's that thing where as an animal, if you hear something, agent detection, yeah, that thing.
Okay.
Agent detection and the decline of religion, people just naturally form these prophecies and conspiracy theories out of things that aren't really factual, and that's why we got insane events like January 6th and all sort of shit going on.
Yep. Yeah, there's the whole thing with I don't watch the news anymore, and then when I do tune in and I find out there are 3 mass shootings in the last week, it's just that I don't watch the news because the news tended to raise my blood pressure I think it tends to give us a false idea of how much danger we're really in, because they only highlight the really horrible things, right? And then
that's true. That's true. Then, some of these guys actually said that one of the reasons why they even did the January 16th is because they were watching a lot of Fox News and they were getting riled up, and they actually thought the stuff was true, and that they were on that sort of agenda setting mindset that if this election is really is stolen, they have to organize and do something about it.
Yeah. We can get people riled up. That reminds me, we had this really dumb dog. And his name was Caesar, and he was afraid of lightning storms. So every time he saw a cloud, he'd rip the front door off, and then my dad would kick his ass. But anyway, so his name was Schnapsy. Okay, it was Schnapsy was the dog. He went out and he got sprayed by a skunk, and he came back crying. He went out the woods across the road. I lived on a farm, and the skunk sprayed him, and he was crying. And then I started. I wanted to go find the skunk because I wanted to shoot it, right? Because there were a bunch of skunks invading our yard, and so I got the gun, and I went out and said, "Schnapsy, come on, go get it!" And I got him all excited, and he ran out again, found the skunk, got sprayed by it. I shot the skunk and came home. But I got
skunk is good eating.
What's that?
Skunk's good eating.
Oh my goodness!
I never let skunk go to waste.
Not up north here.
G-Man tried to get one as a pet one time.
Oh yeah, they make good pets. Really good pets.
Oh yeah, of course.
I think you can have their stink glands removed or something, right? If you have them as
pets. Yeah, you can. And then really, they only spray if they really feel threatened.
Yeah.
Well, they stink anyway. I don't think G-Man did that though.
A little bit.
Well,
they don't really stink that bad.
The thing is, he literally found them in the wild, so that was the thing.
Oh yeah, that's illegal.
It's stupid.
I got chased by a rabid skunk once. It was kind of scary. It was
Seriously?
really sick. Yeah, it was really sick and messed up, and it was just coming at me.
Probably had rabies.
Yep, he was rabid.
That makes sense. But I can't imagine a skunk actually coming at you unless the thing's actually messed up in the head somewhere.
Yeah, they're one of the most prolific carriers of rabies.
Yeah,
I got chased by a Rabbitotangelo once.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
According to Darth Dawkins, all us atheists are rabid.
Where is Otangelo?
I actually heard Otangelo on Discord the other day on politics and religion. I think that was sometime before Darth left it because we sort of gone his underlings for defending this racist bullshit. But yeah. So I heard Otangelo had the whole argument about the fine tuning thing, and he just became insufferable. Started trolling. And then I realized there's a reason why Matt Dillahunty hung up on this guy so quickly. He's just an idiot.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear about Otangelo's Discord server?
No.
Well, he created the Discord server without knowing anything about how Discord works, and let's just say it didn't stay his server for very long.
Yeah.
It was quite fun to be on there.
Everybody knows who Otangelo is because he keeps popping up. And he popped up here yesterday, but then I played that Benny Hill song, and I think he broke up with me again. And
I actually haven't really gotten a chance to have a discussion with him other than just through like YouTube comments. And I joined his server, but then he was arguing with somebody and like it was asking people how he could mute the guy he was losing the argument to. The guy wasn't even like talking over him or anything. Otangelo just didn't want to answer his questions anymore. So anyway, he's asking everybody how he can mute this guy. And that's when people realized that Otangelo had no idea what he was doing. And somebody's like, dude, you gotta get this stuff locked down, or put some roles and stuff because people are gonna be able to start changing things. Well, by saying that just made it obvious that you could do it. So all of a sudden you start with different channels started appearing on his server of like, atheists are the sexiest people alive. Why there is no God. Atheism is the best religion. Somebody, I'm not going to say who, made a rules channel for the server, and then everybody just started making their own rules. And then somebody just started deleting everything. And then the funniest part, in my opinion, was that somebody renamed the chat to Solipsis chat and then started kicking everybody out into their own individual room.
That's clever.
Yeah, that is clever.
And then he just ended up deleting the entire server.
Yep.
I think what precipitated that was when he ended up getting muted by Darth Dawkins. So I think he was just like, okay, I'm just gonna make my own server then.
Yep. I'm sure that's what it was. Yep.
Yeah.
Otangelo was on Sydney Winston's channel earlier today. Sydney did a little thing. Otangelo got all offended because Sydney said that creationists can't be scientists. And boy, Otangelo got all upset over that. So, of course, right?
Yeah, I don't think they can. So last night, Cel Cordova did a thing with Sygart.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to really. I put it on, but I didn't get a chance to listen to anything interesting there.
Yeah, quite a bit. He had Sygart, Rob Stadler. He didn't have Change Tan on. And let's see,
Hayes. What's his name? Hayes.
Yeah, who's a Hayes guy? I forget who he is.
All four of those guys are PhDs, right? It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because Little PP. Oh, I shouldn't even have mentioned.
I don't know who that is. I don't know what you mean by that.
Put a meme out to. 4 PhDs are discussing origins of life.
Ryan Hayes, James Carter, Sygart, and Rob Stadler.
Yeah.
And Cel. We're all talking about. Yep. And they were going through the usual spiel on abiogenesis and how unlikely it all is. So,
yeah,
it was all very interesting.
I had a thought about abiogenesis. I don't know, it's probably just like pure speculation, but would it be possible that like one form of life could have originated and then gone extinct shortly after, and then a new form of life, completely different form of life, arose using the leftover remnants of that life,
Yep. Yeah.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Chemistry isn't really a big, subject of mine. More like after the social sciences, but it's my understanding that scientists have actually studied like early life, how it sort of like started, like in the early Earth scenario, and it's my understanding that they've created something that resembles procells and that they could divide and replicate and kind of lead some clues in how life could arise from inorganic material. There are some scientists that have reported this. Am I correct?
They haven't gone quite that far. They've managed to. I think they managed to. God, I don't even want to speculate. They managed to create a cell with artificial DNA, or basically where they. I think they created. I have no idea, but anyway, there's a lot of little pieces that they've done, and there are something like there's probably 100,000 papers out there on this subject, right? And they're putting together every little piece, and they don't. But they're never going to be able to figure out how it happened. Like what you were saying about one life form could have gone extinct. There were probably that probably happened thousands and thousands of times. Different little startup cells, and they did something and they left remnants and whatever, and then something else started up, and eventually the match was lit. That something came up.
Even if we create, like, even if we could run an experiment that does end up with a form of life, that just demonstrates one way it could have happened. That's no guarantee that it couldn't have happened a different way.
Yeah. And then when you go way back to the point where you just have membranes or what they call, like these lipids forms things called lamina. Like when they dry out a little bit, the membrane sort of collapse and there's like layers. And there's different areas where you can have a very, very microenvironment of I think you mentioned that in the SFT. You said microenvironment. I was so happy you said that. But anyway, there's all these microenvironments that can form and have a certain subset of chemicals, basically. And they don't necessarily have to be homochiral. There could be a lot of things going on in there. And they're just creating more and more complexity. Because the one thing about the universe is, and quantum mechanics, is that it produces the periodic table. And in the periodic table, there's an element called carbon. And carbon has the most remarkable ability to complexify, to complicate things over and over again.
Yeah.
And you add a little bit of energy and carbon goes the other way. It doesn't break down. It goes complex and keeps building up more complex.
That's mostly down to its ability to form four separate covalent bonds at once. Right?
Yep. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. And not only that, but to bond with oxygen and nitrogen and to form rings. And I mean, it just gets...
The thing you're talking about, the membranes, what happens is, so you have a molecule that's polar, and so you have a positive charge on one end and a negative charge on the other. And so what happens is that they end up forming these layers. But sometimes that layer can get, if it gets wrapped around in on itself, you essentially have a like a ball that's hollow on the inside with all the tails pointing towards one way, and that's essentially what a cell membrane is.
Yep. So I mean, we're never going to figure out what happened. All we know is that the Earth was huge. There was a lot of stuff going on, and there was a lot of chemistry going on in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it's from there.
Well, another thing, people will throw out these numbers of how improbable they think it is.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, there was not just one possibility for it to happen. I recently heard a thing that they now estimate that on average, planets have or stars have at least one planet or more than one planet. So there are probably more planets than stars in the entire universe.
Yeah.
And life didn't have to happen on Earth. It could have happened on any other planet, and then that planet would be what we call Earth.
Yeah. Yeah, the improbability argument is just ridiculous because of the amount of chemistry that was going on is something you can never wrap your mind around. And so the improbability arguments don't work. In order to use probability to determine something, you have to know basically the probability of each of the elements, and they don't know, and we don't know. So I mean, it's impossible to use that. So that's just a bullshit argument.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
the problem is that they try to
kind of use this analogy real quick. I mean, it's sort of like the domino effect, right? You have a series of dominoes. They fall. You know, they have the energy. One when it's the other in that series. You know, that forms a sequence of events, a chain reaction, or such like that. I mean, if you use that analogy to something like the universe from, let's say, the Big Bang expanding from the energy 40 billion years. To us right now, I mean, with like that one domino not being hit, representing life happening. I mean, just because that's unlikely doesn't make it impossible. Doesn't make it unlikely to occur, and it doesn't mean it's like these things can be measured in some way. I mean, it's just that the universe is so vast that despite that those chain reactions occurring in that way, it doesn't mean it's it's impossible for our position or some kind of a dilemma for our issue that we have to invoke some designer or God or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, so the way you calculate probability for a series of unrelated events occurring in would be that you would multiply the probability of each event by each event, and then you get the probability of all of them happening. But that ignores the fact that the way chemistry works is like one step can lead to another step.
Yeah, and then it becomes highly probable that you go from one thing to another.
Right. There's not all these things, improbable things happening just by chance.
Well, they like to give you some really complicated protein, with say 200 amino acids, and ask you what are the odds that could just form spontaneously, right, with that particular sequence, and nothing like that happened.
Well, there was no reason it had to be that amino acid. It's like if I shuffle a deck of cards, and it's going to be in some order. It doesn't have to be that. I didn't predict the order before it happened.
Right.
It's. And then another thing is they'll take elements that we find in existing cells and say, well, even if you go to like your simplest cells we have around now, like bacteria, archaea, and then they'll look at the cellular machinery in those cells and use that to make an argument about like what's the chance of that cellular machinery arising on its own. But that ignores that everything alive now is the result of about 3-something billion years of evolution. We don't have access to a protocell to look at.
Yeah.
Bacteria has had just as long to evolve as we have.
I did this with a Python program, basically. And we took something like, I think it was 1,200, they're called 12 MERS, 12 nucleic acids, and ran them through a program called the Vienna package for folding up RNAs. So these are pictures of RNAs, right? And there's basically 230. We ran them through a bunch of cycles. So we folded them the first time, then we melted the system to a certain level, and then folded them again, and melted them again, and folded them again. And these are all like where one particular 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I know we had like 10, 11, and 12, I think, were the nucleotides we used. And we came up with 237 of these structures, right? And every one of these structures has some chemical activity. It could have some enzymatic activity, and they're very tiny. So you don't have to have a whole lot of them. And these are self folds. The one's in black and white. And then we get down into the cofolds where two different RNA molecules hook up together. And there's probably no reason why you couldn't have 3 or 4 or whatever. But more complicated things could happen. These are particularly stable, and there are just all sorts of shapes here, and I could just run through a bunch of them, and you can see that basically this is the complexity of carbon chemistry, and this is the complexity of nucleotides. Of course, we have to get to the point where we have nucleotides.
So these are all computer generated, is that?
Yep, they're computer generated with Python. And I can generate, I call it a world, and there are a number of different worlds that we ran, and we're playing around. Now, the next thing we're doing, this is based on some work that Dimitar Kunev is doing. The next thing we're doing is that these ends here, you see the U and the A at the top and the C and G at the bottom, can grab up a amino acid. And basically, if each end grabs an amino acid, they put them in close proximity so that you can end up with the two amino acids joining up and forming a very basic peptide. So, and then if it moves along to another spot, you can add another peptide. And so these things can actually generate proteins, these very, very tiny machines. And every machine has its own character. This looks like a box wrench. A lot of them look like box wrenches, but and then the other thing that you have to consider for prebiotic Earth is minerals and rocks and the enormous complexity of rocks. People think life is complex. If you look at the minerals and the structure of minerals, and you look into what various ions like magnesium and calcium can do, when they combine with these organic molecules, you end up with enzymatic activity. And the amount of the possible reactions for a prebiotic world are just astronomical. And all you had to have is something that was self-replicating. So what we're looking for is what Dimitar calls lighting the match of Darwinian evolution, basically, where you end up with one of these things basically going around and in some roundabout manner creating itself. And that's where it gets interesting. So anyway, there's a lot of them in here.
Yeah.
I think another.
I went on after show.
I think an interesting
after
thing. Real quick, I think an interesting thing that you mentioned is that this is like similar to worlds. I think we like just use this like fine tuning kind of reasoning on a naturalistic basis for something like the multiverse. Like you could have a multitude of different like situations and timelines and shit like that. Which makes at least one of those universes having the right basis for life being possible on some basis. Like every theoretical possibility exists on that basis. I mean,
So for me, the problem is that like first of all, you don't need to invoke the multiverse for this, and the multiverse right now is purely a mathematical speculation, or it's not there's no real reason to accept that a multiverse exists. I'm not right. But my point is that within you probably have the time scale just within Earth. People don't realize how long a billion years is, but then also you have the other planets within just within the observable universe, let alone what we've predicted the entire universe will have. So I don't think you have to get outside of what we actually know exists.
Yeah, I think we have enough complexity and enough possibility with just the Earth. We don't even need another planet. And obviously, we're here. So,
yeah.
But there's two kinds of people. There's the kind of person that believes in natural complexity and believes that natural complexity is like amazing. Like I said yesterday, I worship it. It's my religion. It's what I have faith in. And then you have the other kind that's like, mechanical things can't possibly do anything by themselves. You got to have an intelligence to create all this stuff. And so there's almost like two kinds of people, and we're divided, like with this solid line between us. People that believe that nature can do, and people that believe that nature can't do.
Right.
Which is an interesting divide. I've always I discovered organic chemistry when I was 10 or 11 years old. And the first thing that happened to me is I became just unbelievably excited about the ways that carbon could combine. And I started to, just work on that. And it's been like a lifelong passion of just looking at different carbon structures. I mean, there's all these, all the things, all those little molecules you can find on the wiki, you know, like if they prescribe a drug to me, the first thing I do is look up its chemical structure.
And well, I think like your computer modeling things are, you know, see now people misunderstand. They're like, oh well, it took an intelligence to build the computer and all this. But what they don't really understand is that when you model something in a computer, you know, we've generated amazing complexity, and none of the complexity itself is designed. You start with a few basic rules and then input, you know, some starting positions, and you can watch the complexity arising within, you know, the simulation naturally. You don't need to program the complexity into the simulation. You just give it the starting conditions and set it off.
Yeah, like when I start writing a program, I always start out with a really, really simple little atom. And then it's like, okay, I need this, and I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that. There's no way that I could write an entire program from the top down. It has to be from the bottom up. I have to basically imagine it as I go. And that's how life happened.
Right. Have you seen the Game of Life program?
What's that?
The Game of Life program?
Yeah, I've seen that. There are some new, I run across some new recent additions to that. I think I showed them on a weather report a few months ago, but there's some really fascinating things going on with that.
Right.
But what I would like to develop is a simple autonomous. Does anybody know what React is? It's Facebook's JavaScript framework for creating web pages. And React allows you to put together little widgets, you know, that you can put on a web page. So you can put together a menu, and you can put together a title bar, or, you know, various areas of your screen. Well, I thought of, and of course I don't have time to do this yet, but if you developed a really atomic set of widgets for a web page, and you just let it randomly build complexity, you know, and like with a Game of Life, and you created web page after web page, and then you had some means of naturally selecting good web pages, right?
Well, that would actually be pretty simple. All you have to do is measure interaction with it. Just see if people spend time, you know, clicking on things with this, then it's going to.
Yeah, if you had 1 billion users clicking on things, you know, and selecting things, that would be very interesting. But they're developing some AI programs now where you can draw a picture of a web page, and it will create a React program for you based on this picture, right? It gives you a skeleton, that sort of thing. And my son came up with the idea of you do that, and what it does is it generates 10 sample pages, and then you pick the sample, and then it goes back to the AI and generates another 10. And then you keep picking it iteratively. And what he was talking about is natural selection. And it would probably be a wonderful addition to those programs that allow you to put together web pages. But React rules. That's one good thing that Facebook did for the world is create the React programming framework.
I'll check it out. I don't know anything about computer programming.
I've been doing it for about 40 years. Way too long.
Right. My older brother was the computer nerd in the family, so I never really got into it.
Yeah, I got started in microcomputers when you had to solder your own.
Nice.
So I worked at a computer store. That was the first electronics job I had. And I ended up putting together the computers that they sold in their store in my apartment with a soldering iron, actually soldering them. And then we got the Apple IIs, and that whole thing started, and, you know, everything took off from there. It was really cool to get into. In fact, the store I worked for sold the very first Apple computers to the very first schools that had them. So that store was in some way responsible for the fact that most schools use Macintosh or Apples. You know, they used Apple products rather than Windows. So it's kind of an interesting development.
Babbledy in the chat said that's interesting. I'd enter some atheism. I'd be more interested in hearing more about this. So,
yep.
You got a suggestion for future content.
Oh, more about that. More about early microcomputers. Yeah, we could talk. I was invited out to a Microsoft conference in Seattle in 1981 or 2, I think it was. And they announced this brand new thing that Microsoft was working on. It was called Windows. And I have a copy of the Windows 1.0 alpha release. Basically, I have a book for the very first Windows product. And it took Microsoft like 3 or 4 iterations. I think it was like Windows 3 or 4 before it finally started to take hold. But it was kind of cool, and met Bill Gates and a bunch of other people out there. So that's how fucking old I am.
Right. I'm old enough to remember MS-DOS as a kid.
Okay, yeah.
I remember having to switch between DOS and Windows to run certain games that we wanted to play.
Yeah, and before that was CP/M. That's what we ran on all the microcomputers.
That's before me.
CP/M and then MS-DOS. And I have a copy of that book. Okay, there was a program when the 8086 processors came out and replaced the 8080 series. There was a company called, I think it was Seattle DOS or something like that. And Bill Gates went over and purchased what became, it's called 86 DOS, I think. And I have a manual for that in my library. And he purchased that for $50,000 and turned it into MS-DOS. So that's how MS-DOS got started. It was a really early operating system that a guy created for the 8086 series. So it's interesting.
So Stephanie Trenton said a computer's biggest enemy is heat. They cannot get rid of it. That's why there are no quantum computers yet. Can you address that?
I don't know anything about quantum computers. But yeah, heat is a problem, but we've gone quite a ways.
Yeah,
to making things smaller.
Yeah, they do have to get it down to absolute zero, and that's how they do run them now. But they're working on that. I don't know that much about it either, but that is true. But they are working on that issue where they don't have to have it cooled like that. That's what they're overcoming. Yes.
I mean, living things also have similar things.
Exactly.
Right. They generate heat.
That's why humans don't have hair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had that
also
issue with regular computers, right? Way back. I mean, there was days where companies had, their computer systems in cooled rooms, right? Way back in the day.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Some of my first contracts, they'd always put me in the computer room where it was like 50 degrees.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't go to work for anybody unless they'd let me smoke. So they always made me an office inside the computer room. And the floors were like raised up like 2 feet, and they had these coolers blowing cold air constantly around these things.
Yeah.
Keep them cool. These mainframe computers fit into our iPhones, like 100 times over now. It's kind of amazing. So we have come a ways in solving the problem.
If you have a compost pile or a manure pile and then you dig into it, it's going to be incredibly hot on the inside.
It's pretty warm in there.
The metabolism of all the microorganisms generating heat.
Yeah, if you stack green hay in a barn, your barn will burn down. Mm-hmm. A lot of barns burned back in the day, including our neighbor's barn. But anyway.
Yep.
So what do you think? Shoot her in the head? We're going to shoot her in the head today?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, I go get some stuff done.
Yep.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. I was about to reach out to you after I saw your debate. So.
I saw your comment.
Yeah, it took me a while to find your goddamn website. First time I searched for a monkey for bananas, I think, and I came up with all these monkeys eating bananas.
Why didn't you just click my username or my thing on the comment that I left?
Oh fuck. Well, yeah, I saw the comment after I asked, so no, I guess I could have done that.
Well, no, you asked for my YouTube link on the comment that I left.
That was too fucking simple for me. My mind doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. I thought it had to be more complicated than that. Anyway. Okay, guys. So we got there's the cow.
There it is.
Yep.
Stay curious.
Does that mean the cows come home?
That
means
until the cows come home.
We're shooting it in the head. Yeah. I got to clip that together. But anyway, the next sound the cow makes is.
That sounds more like a velociraptor.
Cow dying.
T-Rex, son.
That's supposed to be a cow dying. Anyway. Yep. Okay, guys. We're going to end it for the day.
Alrighty.